Hey memers and streamers, it's Fracken here again. So this is the next video in the book review of the book Playing to Win by David Sirlin. And this particular section is going to be the introduction section. And so without further ado, here we go. Introduction, Beginner's Guide. Introduction. I am here to teach you to win. Playing to win is the most important and most widely misunderstood concept in all of competitive games. The sad irony is that those who do not already understand the implications that I will spell out will probably not believe them to be true at all. And I can kind of understand where David is coming from with this. There's certain biases that we tend to bring to any sort of skill building when we first start a new skill, where we have these ideas in our head of, what it should take to build a skill, what the peak physiological abilities of human beings even are, all these kinds of things. And the truth of the matter is that we're almost always wrong. It's part of the reason why, if you have watched the previous videos in this series, I've mentioned that when I'm talking with young people and I'm giving them advice about, any sort of skill building, I always try and convince them that it's worth their time to, pick whatever useful, preferably useful skill it is that they want to build, and build it to the highest level of anybody that they know. And the reason is simple. Once you have done the process once, you understand, what things you were right about as far as, the process of skill building, what things you were wrong about. You learn what the path looks like, so to speak. And so anyway, like he says here, apparently these concepts are something one must come to learn through experience, though I hope at least some of you will take my word for it. And this is exactly why I give that advice. Once you've had the experience of building a skill, it's not such a foreign concept to you. You understand what it takes and what investments you have to have, as far as time, emotional investment, all of these things. And just as importantly, you'll also learn to link internally in your mind the results or the benefit that you will get for that investment of personal energy. So why win at games? The great thing about competitive zero-sum games is that they offer an objective measure of your progress. When you walk the path of continuous self-improvement that a champion must walk, you have a guide. If you are able to win more, that is, more consistently defeat highly skilled players, then you are improving. If you can't, then you're not. The very nature of a game is that it is a collection of rules agreed upon by all players. If players don't agree on the rules, then they are not even playing the same game. Now, this is kind of an important thing here. This is something that we'll all, especially when we first start, when we're still, in that scrub mentality territory, where when we lose or we have a game that we're not particularly happy with, we tend to find virtually every reason as to why we failed except for the obvious, which is we sucked and we simply didn't bring to bear what we needed to in order to win the game. And so there's no weaseling out of defeat by redefining what the game is. The game should not need redefining, and a loss is a loss. And this is essentially what we're doing when we cling to the, these sort of get out of, proverbial jail free cards, mentally speaking. When we lose the game, essentially what we're trying to do is play with weasel words. The other player, had a benefit because of this or that, or, it was the network was favoring him, or the engine was favoring him, or, or whatever the excuse is that's common for your particular game. In pursuing the path of winning, you are likely to learn that concentrating merely on beating the opponent is not enough. In the long run, you will have to improve yourself always, or you will be surpassed. And this is part of the reason why I myself put so much time into, the aim training and the other skill building, because, even from when Destiny 2, because I didn't play the first one, I only play on PC, but the difference in skill level now compared to, when the game first dropped is night and day. I mean, there's common movement techniques. In fact, you'll even notice I have some videos on these things, like the power slide thing. These things didn't even exist in the game as far as players doing them, until much later in the game. So, even if you had a perfect level of skill earlier in the game, in the development cycle or life cycle of the game, you're going to need to continually improve on that if you want to stay ahead of other people, because, even when you're building your skill, so is everyone else. Do you want to win? Before we go on, ask yourself if you really want to win. Most people answer that they do, but they fail to consider that winning takes more than wanting. Oh man, is this important. It takes commitment, extended effort, discipline, and time. Now, that's not to say that, you have to do nothing but things that you find distasteful in order to build your skill. I mean, realistically, the reason why pretty much any of us build any skill is because we enjoy whatever it is that we're doing. In the case of, even the aim training thing that I do fairly often, when I'm doing the aim training, it's I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, you're just sitting there shooting little red circles over and over. It's not exactly thrilling, but in my head, I have a running loop of certain phrases that I repeat to myself to remind me why I'm doing it. I'm literally sitting there shooting little red targets while I keep telling myself, this is so I can hit my shots. It's so I can hit my shots. It's so I can hit my shots. Or whatever it is that particular day that I happen to be using for motivation, but making sure that I'm focusing on that allows me to put that time and effort into something that then has, a payoff at a later date. This is not for everyone, nor should it be. There are a great many things to be in life other than a champion at competitive games. If your interest lies in other places, I suggest you not continue with this book, as it will only upset you. And I can kind of see where David is coming with this as well. Not everybody really wants to or needs to be, a top tier player at whatever game that they're playing. I mean, in a lot of cases, people just want to, just explore the game a little bit just to see what it's about. We all have different motivations, right? But we pretty much all know as human beings that there's something deep inside us. We can never put our finger on it. But, I mean, really stop and think about this. Why are things like professional sports taken so seriously by humans? I mean, pick a very popular sport that has, a lot of emotional engagement in it, that you yourself are not emotionally engaged, and look at it from the outside. For me, that might be something like, say, soccer or football, as they call it in Europe. But, you see people watching these games and getting so upset that they are literally willing to kill referees over a bad call or what they see as a bad call. It seems clearly insane looking at it from the outside, but yet there's a reason why this is so compelling. And it's the same thing for first-person shooter games or any game, really, for that matter. We don't really know why we are so invested in this, but when we find a game that really brings out the passion in us, it's almost an indescribable thing. We don't know why, but it is. It's very, very important to us. If you're one of these people, then, this path here of skill building might be for you. If not, I would agree with David. Pick something else. There's a lot of things to do in life. Do what makes you happy. There are also those who play games for something known as fun. That subject will not be covered here. I believe there is a great deal more of this fun to be had while playing to win than while only playing casually, But there is no use in entering that debate now. This fun is a subjective thing, hard to pin down. And this goes back to what I was just discussing. These are things that we all understand as humans, but we can't really put them into words. And the fun aspect of skill building is part of the reason why I do it. I find it exceptionally interesting to, take something like movement or aim or, whatever part of the overall skill it is, pull that skill out, deconstruct it, see what makes it tick, see what my faults are in that particular skill, do whatever it is or figure out whatever it is that I need to do in order to, to practice to, improve those particular parts. Take that whole thing, once you're done practicing all those different parts, stick that skill back together and see what you have. Are you better now? Hopefully the answer is yes, but to me, that actual process of whittling away at faults and gradually climbing that mountain, because it's like climbing a mountain. The only difference is that there really is no peak, because anytime you think you're at the peak, all you really need to do is just look around and realize you're only halfway up. No matter the game, you must create an environment in which you can improve. You must practice against a wide range of opponents. You must free your mind from self-imposed rules that prevent you from winning. You must develop mental toughness and the ability to read the minds of your opponents. You must interact with a community of other players. Whether you play chess, tennis, Quake, Mario Kart, Street Fighter, or poker, the lessons are all the same. And this is why I mentioned this at the very first video of this series. You wouldn't think that a skill building, thing for an academic skill would have anything, similar with building a skill like first-person shooter skills, but it really does. It's the same sort of thing where all you're doing is you're trying to figure out what faults you have, trying to correct them, figuring out what, good skills you have, leaning into those and trying to leverage them as best you can and build from there. So starting at the beginning of this part here again. So no matter the game, you must create an environment in which you can improve. Now, to me, in the case of a first-person shooter game, this has multiple facets to it. Because it's a physical skill where you're manipulating a mouse and a keyboard and all that kind of stuff, that's one of the things I think you should pay attention to. Make sure that you have all of that stuff dialed in as absolutely as close to optimal as you can get it. And optimal will depend on you, your particular skill set at the time. It's something that will be a dynamic. It's not just a static thing where, this is optimal and now we're done. So my advice for something like this is to kind of follow a similar path to what I did. When I first started getting serious about Crucible, what I would do is I would drop into a match and I would play the match, focusing as much as I could on the match. But then at the end of the match, I would stop and I would think to myself, what happened during that match, or what problems did I face that bothered me the most? And that includes things like physical things. Like say with the mouse, did the mouse pad feel wrong? Did the mouse button pressure for, zooming in feel wrong? Or, was the sensitivity too high? Was it too low? Was it so high that I was overshooting? Was it so low that I was having trouble, keeping track of fast-moving targets? Just being aware of all of the different things and trying to think about all these different things and, figure out which ones of these things were a problem and then try and figure out which parts of these that I could fix, and then just little bit by little bit, whittling away at the problems. And once you whittled away at all the problems, clearly the only thing you're left with is not problems, right? Now, the part here where he talks about practicing with a wide range of opponents. This is something that's been exceptionally helpful for me as well. Open matches against random players. That's certainly one way of keeping your skills sharp, and it's something that's always there, right? You don't have to, try and make a schedule or anything. For open public matches in a modern shooter game, you can just start the game, get in queue, and go. It's just that simple. But if you want to, improve your skills, I would suggest trying to find somebody who's better than you and, try and convince them to be a practice partner. This is something I did with a young friend of mine. He's much younger than I am. He was about 17 when we first started doing this, but we would go into matches, just 1v1s, just me and him, and I would tell him, don't take it easy on me, just shoot the hell out of me, just beat the hell out of me, over and over and over. And little bit by little bit, that fear and trepidation of basically getting the hell shot out of you gradually broke bad habits that I had. A good example of this is one of the habits I had when I first started was once I would start an engagement, there was really only two ways that it could end. Either A, I get killed, B, the other person gets killed, and that's the only options. Me ducking out of the fight was not an option because I simply wasn't aware enough. But playing with this other friend of mine, he was such an unforgiving player that eventually I realized I had to build that skill or I was just perpetually doomed to, basically getting stomped on by him over and over. Freeing your mind from self-imposed rules that prevent you from winning. This will be discussed more in the future here in parts about the scrub mentality, but I think this is just as important as just about any other part. Don't make excuses. If you're, playing a game and you lose to a certain weapon that seems to be meta, well, I got news for you. The only options you have is to keep doing what you're doing and getting the results you were getting and piss and moan about it, or stop pissing and moaning about it and start doing whatever it takes to win. I mean, really, at the end of the day, that's really all there is to it. You're either winning or you're not, and you're either doing things that let you win or you're not. You must develop mental toughness. This is probably something I had in my benefit when I first started playing Crucible. Getting killed over and over didn't really bother me that much because it was, as long as I was getting killed less each day, it didn't really bother me. Now, of course, I mean, that's not the case all the time, right? Like if you really, really get stomped on hard enough, sure, we're all going to be kind of bummed out about that. But for me, it was one of those things where, so long as I'm at least being able to, support my team to some extent and, at least get a few kills here and there, I at least know it's a place to start. As long as I'm getting better over time, it really doesn't matter that I'm losing. Because eventually, if you're getting better over time, the time's going to come when you're not losing anymore. You're going to be the one winning. The ability to read the minds of your opponents. This is an interesting subject to me. Years ago, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was playing a game that was called Descent. It's a 6 Degree of Freedom space shooter game. And it had multiplayer. We had to do interesting tricks in order to get that multiplayer over the internet, but it did have multiplayer modes. And when I would play against friends, the one thing that they would mention virtually every time we played, as long as I was being serious about it anyway, they would repeatedly tell me, it's like you know where I'm going to be before I do. And here's the truth of the matter. When you do this kind of thing often enough, you will often know before the other person does. It just becomes instinct. When you've seen the same thing unfold time and time and time and time again, eventually it's not even something you'll need to think about. Like say you throw even better, let's take a step back. So say you're shooting at somebody and they duck behind cover and, the cover is about as wide as they are. So, say a 4 foot wide post or something. And you can't really hit them from where you're at, but you do have a grenade. So you throw a grenade to the left. Well, what are they probably going to do when they realize that they're taking damage from that grenade? Even if it's not going to kill them, chances are they are probably going to try and evade that grenade, and they're going to pop out on the right side. Right? Now, this is where tactics kind of start coming into this. A good player might do something like this. They see that grenade tossed. They know the other person is probably looking on the other side to, the opposing side of where the grenade was. So maybe they take a sniper rifle, which is a one-shot kill weapon in Crucible, and pop out, leaning into where that grenade is, knowing that it's not going to kill them, but also knowing that it's going to give them a very temporary advantage because they're going to be in a place that the other player doesn't expect them. So they might pop out on the side where you actually threw the grenade and one-tap you. It's one of those things where, when you get to higher levels of play like that, there are lots of interesting mental things. You must interact with a community of other players. This is very important too, and this goes back to where I was talking about, getting some friends that are better players than you that are willing to, coddle you or whatever you want to call it, playing 1v1s to help sharpen your skills. You can't do this unless you're, in a community of other players to some degree. And, so just start making friends. I mean, that's the great thing about modern shooter games anyway. They are really a social experience. I mean, they're basically just shooting simulators with friends, right? It's just big giant chat rooms with guns where you can shoot at each other. So, leverage that. Make friends with the people that you're playing with. Sometimes egos get the better of us, but, try and rein that in. Make friends, and hopefully you can make some friends that are much better players than you, or, even if they're just equal players, maybe they can, or may want to actually join in the process of skill building with you and follow the same path. Gaming as a conversation. Let us look at what it is like to play competitively. A competitive game to me is a debate. You argue your points with the opponent and he argues his. I think this series of moves is optimal, you say, and he retorts, not when you take this into account. Debates in real life are highly subjective, but in games we can be absolutely sure who the winner is. The conflict is between the players. The game itself is merely the medium, the language of the debate. And going back to my example I gave of, where a player might be behind cover and you throw a grenade to the one side, that's kind of what you're really doing, right? You're having a dialogue or a discussion. It depends on how you want to look at it. But, when you're making that decision to throw that grenade, you're saying, I think you are more scared of this than you are of me shooting you when you pop out, or it's so scary to you that you're not even going to be thinking of that. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong. It will always depend on the other player, right? The fun of the great debate, at least to me, occurs when you push the opponent by arguing your point. Then that opponent is able to push back forcefully, yet you are able to withstand this thrust. And I agree as well. To me, really, the best games that I've had, or the ones that I enjoy the most, are games where, somebody is at least equal in ability to me, and, the rest of the game just kind of falls away, and it ends up, in a lot of cases, being a dialogue between you and that other player. Eventually, in some cases, it'll get to the point where the two of you will start seeking each other out. And those games are absolutely a blast where things like that happen. It's a good idea not to take it so seriously that you get bent out of shape if you end up getting killed or something like that, during one of these engagements. But, it's a very interesting thing. There's a lot that you can read through of the other person, what they're thinking, what they're planning, how they're feeling, just by what they're doing in game. And to me, it's one of the most interesting parts of higher level gameplay. If you can simply push the opponent over in any of a dozen ways of your choosing, there is no debate to be had. And to me, what he's describing here is essentially, if the other player is a pushover, essentially all you're doing at that point is just beating up a helpless person. If they can't defend themselves, really what's the point? Unless you're trying to help train this person, who's not as skilled as you are, I don't know. It's just not terribly fun, not really, it would be like, having a professional sports team playing against children. Like, it might be an interesting spectacle for a while, but I guarantee you the guys on the professional sports team are not going to be having fun. Yeah. But anyway, that is the end of the introduction section. And the section up next will be the getting started section. And I hope to see you there. GGs and 7 3s.